No.
Welcome, everyone. It is Monday, April 14th, 2025. It's time for our regularly scheduled city council meeting. Ask the clerk to certify the meeting notice, please.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
You call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Here.
Councilmember Page?
Here.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Here.
Thank you. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item D is changes to the agenda. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to amend the agenda to add item H1 in unfinished business for an informational update on the meeting with Army Corps of Engineers, general information.
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Okay, got a motion and I'll count that as a second. And any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Agenda is amended. Next item is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I recommend or I move for a approval of the consent agenda as written. Second.
got a motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion? It involves a public hearing. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Thank you. Item F1. This is a request to reschedule our 428 city council meeting. That's the next one from Monday to Tuesday. Councilmember Jacobs and I are going to be in Sun Valley on Monday night. So we wouldn't want to leave the three of you all by yourselves. So the request is to move that meeting to Tuesday, the next day.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I will move that the reschedule to 4/29/2025 for our next council meeting, that we approve that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just quickly before a second, can we pull the council to make sure we have a quorum?
Sure.
On the Tuesday?
Sure.
Oh,
Council members, are there any of you that can't make Tuesday?
I cannot.
Okay. Bill?
I can.
Okay.
and I can.
Mr. Mayor, it sounds like we would be able to have a quorum on Tuesday, so I second Mr. or Commissioner Rasmussen, Councilmember Rasmussen's motion.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Next item F2 is Arbor Day proclamation. If I can find it here. Colin, do you remember how many years we've been in the Arbor Day deal? Okay, here we go. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas the holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. Whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, and lower our heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, John G. Evans, Mayor of the City of Garden City, Idaho, do hereby proclaim May 1st, 2025 as Arbor Day. And I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant and care for trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. And witness whereof I hereunto set my hand on this 14th day of April 2025. Next item, F3, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, upon reviewing the notice of decisions, does anyone wish to call out any decision for review for having significant adverse impact on the city?
I do not.
No, sir.
I do not.
Mr. Mayor, the council wishes to make no action.
Thank you. Item G1, this is a public hearing, SUBFY 2025-1. River Villas subdivision. This is a preliminary plat processed as a planned unit development. Who's representing the applicant? If you would, sir, join us. He's coming up for the sake of the audience. The applicant will detail the proposed application to the council. Afterwards, our Development Services Director will respond. Following that, a public hearing will be opened. We'll take any testimony that anyone wants to present. We'll close the public hearing after that and turn it to the council for deliberation. The applicant will have the last word during the public hearing process. Before we start, anybody need to declare a conflict in this application?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
Very good. If you give us your name and address.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Evans. Connor Lindstrom with KM Engineering. I'm sorry.
That's obviously that's a very sensitive.
Yeah, he's Connor Lindstrom with KM Engineering, 5725 North Discovery Way, Boise, Idaho, representing property owner. And I did have a presentation I'd sent over to Hannah. I don't know if that can be pulled up. Okay, it's the same one from planning and zoning. Okay. Thank you. It's in the stack. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. We sent it prior to Planning and Zoning Commission. Yeah. Try that one. No, you're fine. That's the space plan. That's not all the slides. Let's see here. Let's scroll down. Yeah, I mean, I can roll with them. I've got hard copies too of everything, so. Let's start on that. Awesome. Thank you. So Mayor Evans and Council, the application before you is for River Villas subdivision. It's a townhome project. We are requesting a preliminary plat and plan unit development. This is a project that's just off of 43rd Street. It's about 1,000 feet northeast of Adams Street. It's comprised of 14 townhome lots Two of which, they're up front here. Those are going to be our live work units. And then we also have one common lot. So if I scroll down here, this shows you the subdivision plat there. So we previously, we started our application process with the neighborhood meeting. We met with, we gave notice to neighbors, none of which showed up. So it was myself and our architect and property owners, but that was back in October. Submitted our application and met 2 different times with the design review committee. We worked through some, through a few different things, open space calculations, just overall design, a few things that I'll touch on here in a bit, but met with design review twice, and then planning and zoning commission before this. Planning and zoning commission recommended approval unanimously via consent agenda. So we are here today. As I stated, we're off 43rd Street here. So maybe if I scroll down, you can get a better site image. You're not going to see it on here, but in this project location vicinity map, it's a pretty narrow lot, as you can see. So to the north and to the west, we have some industrial and commercially zoned properties. Across the street, directly across the street, is future public school. And then to the south, we have some more light industrial commercial uses. There's a mobile home park there as well. And so that's kind of the surroundings. And then if I go back up here, this kind of shows you this gives you a better idea. So just to the south there's that mobile home park. Future public school is just across the street. I don't know if I can go back. Let me try that and we can get to this. Gives you a better image, I think. That was the same. Loading. Well, anyways, I'll just continue. So the future land use map designation for this property is mixed use residential. It is with a neighborhood destination node overlay, which allows for a mix of commercial and residential uses. And so what we're providing here is mostly residential, but we do have the live work product up front. So both commercial and residential uses. We're presenting a site plan that we believe is in conjunction with the comprehensive plan. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. So this shows you the site plan. As I noted, these are the 2 live work units up front. And we do believe that this plan is in compliance with the comp plan and what a PUD would allow for. So it's to encourage a variety of housing, including well-designed smaller units, flexibility and setbacks, parking requirements to meet the needs of specific dwellings, and requirements for pedestrian amenities, including parks, open spaces, and pathways. And so, as I mentioned, we have 14 residential units. We have kind of a mix here of 2 and 3 bedroom units. And the pink up front, those are the live work units. They're going to be your 2-bed. No, those are going to be the 3-bed 2-car units. And then all the smaller units here in yellow, those are going to be your 2-bed 1-car units. And then we have the other units, as you can see here, are going to be 3-bed 2-car units. So a variety of housing types are provided. If I can scroll down here, it's not wanting to scroll on me. I'll go to open space next. So with surrounding the units, we have various open space areas. This was a large discussion that we had with the design review committee. They wanted to see open space at 10% is required with the planning unit development. We are providing that. We're actually providing 13.7% of the site as open space. It was less than that before, but we were able to work with them to add some additional amenities. So as you can see, we're providing a covered bike parking, bike repair station in the northwest corner here. We have a fire pit area, additional bike parking. We have a dog park in the southwest corner that'll be used by the residents. I feel like they will use it quite often. We have a horseshoe pit here, and then an additional barbecue plaza. And also in discussions with the design review board, they wanted to see some additional landscaping or some sort of attractive site amenities along 43rd Street. So we included the entrance planters here. And so with that, we're providing significant amount of amenities, more than is required. And we also feel that we're meeting the open space requirements. There was some discussion about the size of the open space areas. You can see we have a couple, longer skinny areas that code, it's kind of in the gray area on exactly what is allowed. It's stated that they have to be at least 400 square feet, which both of these are, but the code doesn't like when they're more narrow in nature. But given that we provided some additional amenities as a fire pit and barbecue plaza, we think that adds to the value for residents and the development as a whole. I like to also, I'm going to struggle to get to it through this, but there was a mobility plan that was submitted. I'll try to find it here, but it shows that this project is very close to the Greenbelt, 0.1 miles away, in fact. And I don't believe it's here. We'll start with this. So just up the road here to the northeast is the Greenbelt. We feel that this project is going to be a great product type for folks that want a more active lifestyle. They're going to live here and use the Greenbelt. We think that's a great amenity for folks to be able to get on the Greenbelt quickly. And so we made sure to provide, sidewalks and some pathways, if you will, for folks to know how to get from their unit out into the street, into the Greenbelt. So that was something we worked with the design review committee on too, to make sure that it's clear how to get to the Greenbelt. As I mentioned too, we have just across the street, Future Public School, and just beyond that, we have Beaumont Park there. So lots of amenities for folks to use. And we believe that this is a great product that's going to be a benefit to the city and for future residents. I like to touch lastly on the clear vision triangle situation, so that you saw that on a previous image here. We are meeting clear vision triangle standards. That was something that was brought up with the design review committee, just to make sure that we weren't creating any site obstructions for folks as they're entering and exiting the property. So that has been addressed. That this perspective view that I showed here, that Glancy Rockwell put together, gives you a great idea of what the development will look like. And if you have any specific questions about the elevations and architectural components, Dave with Glancy Rockwell can help answer those. But I think I did a good job of trying to sum it up. I'm sorry the presentation, I don't know what happened. I sent it over, but I guess it didn't get added. But I have hard copies of that if you'd like to see it more thoroughly. But I think that sums it up. The city's been great to work with, and I'm happy to stand for any questions that you might have.
Okay, any questions, council?
Mr. Lindstrom. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious, thank you for the presentation and for working through the challenges that
Yeah, no worries.
always present with technology. So in this unit, if I'm a guest at one of the residents' place, where do I park?
Worried Park. Okay, so if I go back to, I think the open space exhibit's probably the best way to show that. So we have, so each unit has a garage space. So we have 2 and 1 car garages, depending on the size. All your 3-bedroom units are going to have 2-car garages. So folks will be able to park in their garage. And then for any additional parking or for guests, there is street parking along 43rd Street, but the main idea here would be that folks would use the parking spaces provided. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces here. And then at the furthest west portion of the site, we have 4 spaces there as well. So in total, we are meeting the required parking requirements for the number of units. There's also, as I mentioned too, the bike parking too, which we Ideally, people living here will have less vehicles. That's the idea, but we also live in Idaho, so.
And I appreciate that
Yeah.
observation. And then last question, thank you, Mr. Lundstrom, would be, and forgive me for not understanding these drawings like I should. I don't have a background in this.
Yeah,
Are there what I want to call front doors? Or is this common drive to the garages? Are the front doors located on that drive?
yeah. So the front doors are going to be along the building frontage here. And if I go back down here, this might give a better picture via the rendering. Obviously your live work unit. So along the street, these units are going to have a little bit of a different access than the others because you have more of a commercial access off the frontage, but your units entrances are going to be, so it's kind of hard to see, but there's both garage entrances and doorways off of that main
Thank you.
drive. Yep.
Thank you.
Well,
Other questions?
off the side. Okay.
Would you repeat that so we get it on the
Yeah.
record?
Probably what I'll do here is I'll go back. I know we're going back and forth between this, but I'll pull up the site plan. I think that'll give a better idea. I think it was this one. What's the next one? Bear with me, bear with me. Glad you're here, Dave. It's the architects. There we are.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so we have a mix. So you can see in yellow here, so this entrance is off of the drive, but then where we have, and this is an older site plan because we've had some minor changes to the open space, but there are some units here where you have entrances off of the side. So I think this depicts that we have both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with me.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Lundstrom,
Mhm.
I appreciate your presentation. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
The one public comment that I captured, and there may be others, but the one that's on record reflects concern about road access and
Mhm.
traffic flow during construction.
Yeah.
As you may be aware, I work down at Fisher's and have experienced quite a lot of construction in that area.
Mhm.
And it is very frustrating.
Mhm.
And particularly when you are building across from a school, I become even more concerned. To that end, I would offer the empty lot behind Fisher's for the workers, and I would ask that you pass that along and invite them to park there, not on the
Okay.
streets, and that they can cut through. There's access from 42nd to
Okay.
43rd.
That's great.
And please be very mindful of the safety issues with the school there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll call you back up after the public has an opportunity to chime in. And
Okay,
then we'll
great.
hear from our Development Services Director.
Thank you. I don't know if you saw that. This is gonna be the most recent stuff there.
Mayor and members of the council, good evening, and I don't know when I'll remember not to touch the microphone. But
I don't know when I'll remember to have it fixed, so I'll try to remember.
Mr. Lundstrom did a great job at presenting their application. Just to reiterate or to everything's on the record, and I think he hit all the highlights. But this is a proposed preliminary plat for 15 residential units, 2 of which include the potential for live work. It's located in the C2 zoning designation, and the 15 units equates to about 20 units per acre. In that this is a plan unit development, one of the points of discussion that we have is how it meets the housing variety. And as he went through, there are 7 or 9 3-bedroom units with 2-car garage. And the reason I say that wishy-washy is because 2 of them do have the ability to have live work. And then there's 5 2-bed units. The one thing that I really do, I do want to point out what the waivers are for. A couple of the waivers are standard waivers that we see. First of which is more than 4 units on a common drive. And the second waiver is to allow for those 0 lot setbacks. The third, as he already mentioned tonight, is for the common areas where the overall square footage is met to meet code. The dimensional requirements aren't exactly met. And so that is the third waiver that is requested. One other item that I want to point out that looks like it might be an inconsistency with code that isn't an inconsistency is that you'll see that there's attached sidewalk. And almost all of our applications come through with detached sidewalk. And the reason for that is because the sidewalk already exists and our code will allow for existing sidewalk to remain. The last thing that I wanted to point out is there had been some discussion about terminal views and the applicant with the design review, and the applicant team has submitted something that it sounds like they might have to look or work on that a little bit more, and that there's a 30-foot Boise sewer easement to the rear or to the west of the property. And this just developed, I believe, on Friday afternoon, where the trees that they had proposed there may not be something that can be in place. However, that is already taken care of potentially with draft condition number, I think it's 7 on page 69 of your packet, which already talks to the need to have a terminal view and to work with staff. And so there may be solutions there that staff doesn't have concerns with the applicant, working with the applicant. Maybe they can have some shallow rooted vegetation, maybe artwork or signage or something that might be there to be able to take that place. The trees are also needed for the parking, but again, staff's confident that there's probably room to work with the applicant should the council feel that that condition is adequate. And with that, I stand for questions.
Questions of staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just for clarification and for the record, this is a 14-unit development, correct?
Excuse me, I said 15 based on my staff report, but thank you very much.
I'm like, am I looking at the right thing? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll open
Thank
the
you.
public hearing now on SUBFY 2025-1. Do we have any we don't have anyone signed up to testify. I think our technology is working.
Apologize. I
Oh,
believe we have somebody in-
Did I? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you're supposed to sign up. No. No, you can come up. We'll get you on the recording. No. Feel free to come up here. Yeah. Don't touch them. Yeah, and don't touch the microphone.
We'll get a new one for the next meeting.
Yes, thank you. If you would give us your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council, men and women, and staff. My name is Karen Crosby. I live at 8481 West Echo Falls Lane. And my feedback is that the City Council has approved projects to some degree similar to this project here. And where my concern is with parking and overflow parking. For example, one of the projects that was approved is on Coffee Street on the other side of the memory unit there. And then on the other side is Willowbrook. So for example, that is a townhouse, townhome, and Airbnb. And the people that live there are parked on both sides of the roads, and they're parked into like two homes into Willowbrook. So if you're ever traveling down Coffee Street there, you're having to swing out past the mustard line over onto the other side. And an example, and just of recently, was with the speed sign that was set up just down the road, and people were swinging out over into the oncoming traffic just to get around that. So what I'm trying to accentuate is that road and how narrow it is. And I can appreciate the city council for what they do. However, they take a planner and an organization's word at how things are going to happen. And as he described, basically there's extra parking out there on 43rd Street. And as this city council lady had mentioned about the school, how is that? I don't know 43rd good enough to know how that is really structured, but we all know humans are habitual, and basically they take their garages and convert them into storage units, and they're parking outside. So if you got a 14, 15 unit, you basically got 35 cars approximately, right? And there's only like 9 parking places out there, kind of that. You know, are you on a 2-bedroom, 1-car garage, are you really going to get 1 car? You got 2 people, right? Not typically. So I don't know how it is parked there and how the parking currently happens today with the school there as well, because you also have parents dropping off their kids or picking up that traffic right there. So is it really conducive to taking their word that, nothing's going to happen, when in actuality, something's going to happen? And we've seen the case in point over here off of Coffee Street. So that was just my feedback about the parking and how condensed and how packed in this project is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, council? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else that wishes to testify didn't sign up? Yes, ma'am. You would give us your name and address for the record? Welcome.
Lisa Tony, 5921 North Cloud 9 Drive. And I'd like to echo what Karen just said about the coffee. I don't know what the name of the little 12-unit thing they put in, but when we went through this before, they were going to rent those, and nothing was said about them turning into vacation rentals. And when we kind of toured them, they said, oh yes, each unit has a garage, but when they started renting them as vacation rentals, you had to pay extra for that. So nobody who's getting it short term is going to do that. So that's a very bad situation on coffee. And the one thing I wanted to say on this current project is you've put the 2 townhomes that have businesses on the end where there's no parking. So if these are businesses that require someone to drive up to them, where are they going to park? And if you do have a school in the future across the street, it's not good to have parking there with kids running across the street. So that's my views on it. And I also, we would love a future where the buses come by every 15 minutes and there's only one, the buses is full, but we're not living in that right now. And it is bad. I ride my bike a lot too. And the cars on the roads here in Garden City, it makes it hard to ride our bikes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can I comment via Zoom?
Yes. Is it McGear?
You're close. I appreciate that. It's Brad McGurr.
Okay, McGurr. Okay, sorry, Mr. McGurr. Go ahead.
That's okay. I've been called much worse. I live at 4213 North Hardtail, which is right off of 42nd Street. And I was interested in this project. I completely support the development that's been suggested on 43rd Street. I know the area quite well. I don't see any on-street 43rd Street as it currently exists. With 9 additional parking places for 14 units, it seems sufficient to me personally. It's an area of Garden City that I know the city council has been desirous of improving in that area. We have some new businesses at the boardwalk that just went in. I think 4, maybe 5 businesses that just started. They certainly need customer service, if you will. We have apartments on 42nd Street and 43rd Street that also have retail on the bottom floor. Hopefully, they're going to fill those spaces soon. Obviously, you need more of a population in which to do so. I think this particular project looks like it's well designed. It's a narrow piece of property. I should point out that there's not going to be a future school there. There is a school there called Future Public School, and it's not directly across the street. It's across the street and to the north. So it's not directly across from Future Public School. So I don't think there should be a lot of turmoil with regard to that. So in short, I'm supportive of this project, and I would hope that more such projects in the future are designed and developed in the 42nd and 43rd Street and further in the near future. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions, council? Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see anybody else. I'll go. Mr. Lundstrom, do you want to close?
Thank you, Mayor Evans. Appreciate it. I don't know if I can share my screen again. Is that an option? Let's see. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the comments. As far as sounds like the main concern, or one of the main concerns here, is parking for the development. So as far as the parking that we are providing, as I mentioned, it does meet the code. There is required to be at least 28 residential parking spaces, which can include the garage spaces as well. We have provided that, and we are meeting the code. As far as the location of the site, I think if I go back here, it's going to be a better image. I know we're going back and forth here. So this is the best I can do. But you'll see this is the site, long and skinny site. So the last gentleman that spoke, he is correct. The school, it's not directly across the street. It's actually further to the south here. So directly across the street is not the school. It's this other, I don't know if it's the Fisher's property or not, but it's a larger lot. And you'll even see here, we have some cars parked on the street that kind of shows you, what the street section looks like. But as far as the businesses go, the live work units, really the idea behind that is that you have somebody living in the space that can also have a small office space below. The vision is usually some sort of art studio or live at home, live at home, work from home situation where you don't have customers constantly coming. It's not necessarily like a storefront, like a coffee shop. So I don't see there being significant traffic from the public coming to those units other than the folks that already live there. So I like to mention that. There is some street parking. It is a public street, but the intention is for folks that live there to fully park within the development between garage spaces and the other spaces, the 10 spaces that were provided. There is a requirement too that no folks are allowed to park on the shared driveway, and there will have to be no parking signs that are erected. And so you won't have anybody blocking this drive aisle. And Boise Fire also commented that they don't have any concerns with the site plan and development. So I hopefully that helps some. As far as the vacation rentals go, I can't speak to that. They will be privately owned, but I understand that more parking could happen, but even with the garage spaces and the additional overflow parking spaces, I think there should be ample amount of parking for 3 and 2 bedroom units. And I'll stand for any questions.
Any other questions, council? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I'll close the public hearing on SUBFY 2025-1. And the matter is properly before the council for deliberation.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I do just want to make a record. I appreciate anyone and everyone who comes to a meeting and makes a comment. We value the opinions and comments of every person. I too have been a parking hawk. I would consider myself hawkish about parking. And I do just want to assure the comments here today that this is closely our staff does a great job of ensuring that this meets parking code. And while this neighborhood looks different than the neighborhood that you or I might live in, that type of housing inventory is very desirable for folks who want to live there and who use cars differently than many other neighborhoods might use cars. So this project meets our code, and so that's an issue that is resolved in my mind as far as parking. So I just want to make a record about that.
President of Council, I concur. I, on the basis of the application, this meets code. The code is the law, and that is what is required to build to, and we cannot enforce anything beyond that. I do believe we've had conversations over time amongst the council members in here in the chamber, and with input from our chief of potentially approaching parking strategies that might benefit particularly this area in the east end of town that does have these very narrow streets and some, medium density and smaller units that you tend to see more parking on the street. And I believe that it probably is worthwhile to have a work session to discuss this further with the chief and allow him to weigh in on some options. I know that we've discussed a few different strategies, and it might be worth, as we continue to see these developments come through, it's probably worthy. I know certainly on 42nd, it's worth a conversation at least, because there's certainly frustration on 42nd. I suspect 43rd, as it continues to build out, it's just going to continue to compound. So we might as well get in front of it. So I would suggest that we schedule a working session where we discuss parking in the east, strategies for the east end of town.
Would you like to make a recommendation for a date certain?
Not knowing what's coming down the pipeline, as I indicated, I would not be available on the 29th. So potentially May 12th, I believe, is the second or the first council meeting in May.
Mr. Mayor, would you take mayoral notice of that request and
Sure.
try to find a spot in our?
Yeah, we'll pencil it in for the 12th of May. That's an easy discussion to have. That would give the chief time to noodle it some more, and then we can talk about it internally.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Council President and Mayor, I don't really have anything additional to add. I think it's clear that staff's work on this and analysis against our code, that this does definitely meet our code. And then just maybe subjectively, I think this project is fantastic, and I think it's what, you know, what we like to see. And again, I'll speak for myself, what I like to see in this part of town, so I'm excited for the project. Yeah, I think it's something that we want to see, so thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add, I think I just addressed the design consultant with it, who had questioned the landscaping, I think, in the way that was structured. I think that the applicant described well that, you know, we have certain dimensional standards in the code, but however, they have kind of other active and passive open areas that may not be dimensionally exact, but they do meet the intent of the code, and when added together provide more than the percentage. So I just want to make sure, since that was called out by the design consultants, that we address that.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, what's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
hearing unanimous support, I move to approve SUBY 2025-0001 with findings of fact, conclusion of law, and reasoned decisions.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? You know, the clerk call roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Item G2, this is a continuation of the discussion regarding the second reading of ordinance 1050-24 and CPA FY 2024-4, also known as our buffers ordinance. We've Jenna's come up. This has been an evolution because this represents some change. And we had between Jenna and Charlie, we had plenty of reading to do in preparation for this meeting. The purpose tonight is to do a couple of things. One, discuss the memos that were conveyed in the packet. Two, have a discussion on whether what was presented in the packet meets the expectation of the council. And if it, and I think that can be a discussion, Council President, whether I'm not asking for a yes or no, you know, but you can have it, certainly the council can discuss that. Another component is a discussion regarding what constitutes a substantial change in the ordinance that would trigger a renoticing and hearing on the proposed changes. So we have a major, well, I won't use the word major because that's leading the council. It's not my intent. We have a change that would involve if you approve an RM zone, let me back up. In this thing, if we do the make changes to the R3 zone, I should let Jenna do this. The R3 zone would include additional uses and the table that goes with those. The intent of doing that and the RM is to bring an opportunity to the council to make our zoning code reflect what our comp plan says. So on the east end of town, that would be things that we would think of more as mixed use, where the R3 is. And on the west end of town, it would include things that we would call medium density that would be included in the RM if that zone were created and then utilized. So if I haven't messed that introduction up too badly, I'm going to go ahead and let our expert walk us through the memo. And then, Council President, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I may start by just going through line by line the changes that have been made to the draft ordinance that's before you tonight since the public hearing the last time we visited this matter. The first of which, as this ordinance proposal has been refined more and more, the RM, the residential medium density zoning district designation has gotten legs under it. But in doing so, that becomes the comprehensive plans designation for residential medium density and shifts the residential, the R3 district to be the mixed use residential. And so just in the tables discussing the different districts, that shift has been made, taking that to R3 district from the residential to the mixed use districts. There has been some language that's been cleaned up, working with the legal department, where unnecessary wording that could be subjective in nature has either been changed or stricken, just to keep things clear, not changing the intent whatsoever, but just cleaning up the language. And then during the hearing, there were some concerns about how height is addressed with belfries and parapets, etc. That language has been broken into two categories and specified that the height limit overall for parapet and belfry and the list of other items, spires, steeples, cupolas, etc. That would be the maximum height in the RM, and then the parapets, the RM in the R2 zones, whereas there's some allowances that still would be allowed in the other zones. One of the biggest changes is that 82B3F3 was previously drafted to create a height transition zone between other zones and the RM and R2 zones. There's a suggestion to update this to note that not all zones may be compatible with their heights and provide the regulations that were previously subscribed just to be between other zones in the RM and R2 zones, but have illustrations of how those heights could potentially be compatible when there's incompatibility between any zones. Figure titles have been added where lacking. And the definition of greenbelt, there had been a proposal to change that, and that has been removed. And the reason for that is we're doing a lot of ordinance rewrites and work on getting everything to work together within our code. And at the last meeting, I believe it was the last meeting, there was approval of how the police departments are to address the greenbelt regulations and speed and whatnot, and removal of that or changing that definition may affect that. So the proposal is to stay at the existing current definition. Another larger change is there have been provisions throughout this process to update 84B3 and 84B4. However, there's another code revision that's working its way to you where those sections of code are also being reviewed. And so staff is suggesting the cleanest thing to do in case there's tweaks as that goes through the process is just take those sections and relocate them in the PUD ordinance that you will be seeing soon. It's anticipated to go to hearing on Wednesday in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then another large change is that if that R3 zone then becomes more of the mixed use residential zoning district, staff would suggest perhaps now is the time to look at the use designations and has proposed that those uses be more aligned with the mixed use zoning district. That's something that we haven't had discussion on, but if there is the separation to make those zoning districts really start to look like what the comp plan says they should look like, having the residential higher density mixed use R3 zone intended to be that area east of town that meets the residential mixed use without any non-residential uses or very few non-residential uses would be difficult. Whether or not you choose to leave that in and move forward, just based on the development that we are seeing on the east end of town, I would suspect that perhaps an applicant driven or future public zone change would be in front of you in the near future to address that and look at that in a little bit more thoroughly. And that's it for the changes that are in the packet. I did want to note that the city did receive public comment that hasn't gotten to your packet yet. And it may be worth looking at that. And so staff may have additional comments based on that public comment that's come through and not made it to the packet yet. And with that, I stand for any questions or comments.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Director Thornborough, for that concise presentation. Couple questions. You referenced planning and zoning revisit to this. Would we anticipate a different or a new recommendation from planning and zoning? Is that being asked for?
Mayor, Council President Page, where staff is saying that there is a section of code that staff is suggesting should go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, is they're looking at making a recommendation to you on the plan unit development ordinances. And there are specific provisions within residential design that I think there are comments and suggestions to the code, to those sections of code. And so staff is suggesting, instead of making changes to that code, because this one's slightly ahead of the other code, to take those suggested changes and relocate them just to be dealt with, including the changes that have been discussed through this process. But in case there's any minor tweaks that aren't caught now, that P&Z would recommend or City Council would like it as that goes through the process, that the easiest way would just to keep it all together instead of changing it twice. I hope, or your other question may have been regarding looking at the uses within the R3 zone. Staff will suggest to City Council that the uses in all zones are something that perhaps City Council may want to look at. There may be things that can be streamlined and made easier that make more sense. Or there may be uses that may be allowed, probably fewer than the other way, that you want to tighten down a little bit, depending on the zone they're in. And so on my list of things that the city should look at is uses and the requirements of those uses. So Garden City Code 82C has a lot of different uses and specific requirements for those uses. Say a drive-through has to be X feet away from a residential, X feet away from another drive-through. And then when their conditional use are permitted and how we look at that. I think that would be worthwhile for the city council to look at in the future.
Thank you, Director. Your professional insights are so valuable to me, and I believe I speak for all council members. Second question I have, you alluded to a public comment that would be forthcoming. It's not a part of the record yet. And allowing the public to speak for themselves. Can you give us just a high line view? Is it in opposition or support of this?
Mayor, Council President Page, I would say neither. I think it's a member of the public who went through and thoughtfully went through the code line by line and made red line suggestions and provided thoughts. And unfortunately, I wasn't aware of it in time to incorporate it into the packet. But they did go through and spend time neither in favor or in opposition, but more critically looking at the code as drafted. I think with the intent to help the city out is my understanding of those comments.
Fantastic. That's the end of my questions, council members. I don't know.
Other questions?
Director Thornborough, can you share, is it an attorney that went through?
I think I can say who it is. Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen. It is Mr. Taunton, who is online tonight. And so not an attorney, but somebody with quite a bit of land use experience.
Thank you.
Okay. This has turned into quite a project. Brenda. Yeah, it's just.
Thank you.
You get into the weeds and the challenges start popping up. Couple of things we can council can discuss what Jenna just presented insofar as explaining the differences that she's recommended in this memo. And you can respond to those. Mr. Taunton's memo may impact some of those from a clarification or critical point of view. I don't know. You can punt again and look at additional information. You can certainly give some thought that I think would be helpful for the staff on whether the section in what we're calling the buffering ordinance, the topic tonight, if that piece that is also being addressed in the PUD ordinance, which is in process, if you'd be amenable to removing that from the buffering piece and let it continue to be incorporated in the PUD piece and therefore get to the same, instead of trying to deal with it here. The challenge I see is to the degree possible, the council not getting ahead of the P&Z kind of gets things out of order.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's one piece. I think we agended this up, so it's under action items. If that's something, and Jenna, why do you always leave after you're done? You're supposed to. I want you to be part of this discussion. I'm teasing you a little bit, but don't let me mischaracterize what I think I've heard you say. So would it be your preference to deal with that portion you described as is part of the PUD effort? Would you prefer that that be dealt with in the PUD and removed from the buffer?
Mayor, yes, I would. I think
Okay.
it would be cleaner.
Okay. So that's something that the council, if they chose to, could make that decision tonight. And that takes that off of our director's plate insofar as the buffering piece concerns. Let me ask the council a question. The changes that would occur, well, let me back up. What are your feelings about making changes to our zoning code that would potentially or give the council an opportunity to mirror or bring into compliance our zoning code with our comp plan? Is that something, knowing the comp plan doesn't have the force of law, the state code says we should consider it in land use decisions. So is that an objective worth pursuing?
Mr. Mayor. I'd like to answer your question, and I'd like to also provide additional comments. And I'm sure that other council members have some things too.
Good.
Can we put a pin in that question?
Sure.
And I would like to request a summary of Mr. Wadham's memo as it relates to material change, if that's proper, Mr. Mayor.
This is a council deliberation, so I think the council should drive the discussion. So the answer is,
Mr. Wadhams, would you indulge us in simplifying your memo, especially as it pertains to material change and your viewpoint of that from a legal perspective?
Yes, Mayor, Council President, I would be happy to. My memorandum starts on page 84 of your packet. On page 87 of your packet, which is also page 4 of my memo, I say my legal recommendation for April 14th is that the city council should determine if there's been a material change to the ordinance. Material change is a factual determination, is a determination for the council, not for staff, not for the mayor. It's up to the council to determine whether it's a material change. What it means though, is if there's been a material change to the ordinance, it's basically not a complete start over or a do-over, but we're going to take a pause. You know, if the council thinks there's been a material change, then the law requires that we notice it back up, set it out for another public hearing so the constituents can come out and testify again. There have been a lot of changes, as Ms. Thornborough has said, and as the mayor said, it's been kind of a moving target a little bit. And so it is up to the council. It's within the council's discretion. But the standard is if there's been a material change, then we should probably, I think the best practice would be to notice it up for another public hearing. The law on material change I have in the memorandum is that it's up to the council, but it needs to be supported by the record. So if the council believes strongly one way or another, if the council could rationalize that or explain that so we can get it in the decision document, that would be helpful. If you're asking me, does it feel like a material change? I think it's close. Yeah, I mean, I think the council would be in their discretion one way or another, but it sure feels close to a material change. It's gone from a 33-page ordinance to a 53-page ordinance. I don't know how many iterations there have been since it started with the design review consultants. And I put that, if the council would like me to point to that, I have a summary of the changes. Well, let me back up. The summary of the chronology of the thing is on page 86. I started working on it basically on December 9th, 2024. And you can see just from this timeline that there's been multiple work sessions. We've already had a first reading, and since the first reading, it's changed after the first reading and after the first public hearing, it's changed several times since then. And so the summary of the changes are that the medium density Planning and Zoning Commission, that they did not even consider that zone. That's a pretty big change to add a new zoning designation that P&Z did not recommend on, or recommended we not do, or something like that. Jen is shaking her head. Set me straight on that, would you
You,
please?
you would like me to address that now, Mayor and members of the council. I know the RM zone did come about at discussions at the city council. I do want to, just to clarify, there has been one hearing that did include that concept. That concept was included in the hearing.
So Council President, I think that's the really, it's noticed up as an action item tonight. I think, and I would recommend, and I'd request the council to determine whether it thinks there's been a material change, so staff knows how to tee this up. And then the summary of the changes is on page 88 of the packet, which is also page 5 of my memo. And that is the second paragraph and the third paragraph. And the fourth paragraph kind of summarizes the changes, the various iterations, starting from design review, going forward to today's date. So thank you.
President of the council, Mr. Wadums, if you don't mind, I'd like to back up even further. I know it sounds like it should be obvious and intuitive, but as you and I both know, the definitions when we begin to apply it to law can be very particular. So please provide the definition of material change.
Yes. Let me find that in my number. Over here. I'd be happy to do that this time. The definition right here. Well, I can give you an example. So on page 87, what is a material change is when the city council deviates from the planning and zoning commission's recommendation or makes alternative changes, that could become a material change. Changing zoning specifications, there's case law that's like changing zoning specifications, that would be a material change. So this feels kind of like that. I mean, this is not a zone, it's a zone designation, but it kind of feels like that. And so a specific example is of rezoning agricultural property to residential property, that would constitute a material change. So I would say material change are significant variations from what was recommended below, or what was drafted at the first public hearing in front of City Council.
So, Mr. Wadums, as you're explaining it, so if I ask ChatGPT to give me a definition, it includes words like alteration or modification that impacts the core terms, obligations, or expectations. In this return, it's referring to a contract. So if you remove contract and apply code, in my world, I would say that we meet that gate.
Mayor, Council Member Jorgensen, yes, ChatGPT is great. Let me give you the legal definition, the Idaho legal definition. Material change is generally interpreted as a significant alteration to the substance of the proposed ordinance. And that's on page 87 of the packet, page 4 of my memo. Again, material change is generally interpreted legally as a significant alteration to the substance of the proposed ordinance. If that answers your question, Councilmember.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Bond, just one question. I'm a little confused. So I think from the original code, clearly it's material change, but I guess we had a public hearing. We talked about rezoning, we talked about 3M, we had public testimony about all that. So I would, in my mind, there hasn't been a material change since the public hearing, because we talked about all of these things, or that's what I'm a little confused. So is it material change from the original code, or just from any changes from the last public hearing?
Mayor, Council Member Jacobs, I would say arguably both. Arguably both. I think obviously there's been a change from the planning and zoning recommendation to today. There's also been changes from the first reading in the public hearing to today. So yeah. I think there's been both.
Because we could done some language changes and we tweaked it, and I don't know if those are considered material change. And because we talked about these topics in the public hearing versus, that's where I'm a little. What's the basis of the change from when?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, on page 88, I'll just read for the members of the public that are here to Regarding ordinance 1050-24, City Council has come full circle on some of the items. For example, the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Design Review Consultants did not recommend further restrictions of R3. This was put in and then taken out by council. Design Review and Planning and Zoning specifically did not want the height transition. However, City Council directed staff to put it in, and now it will be taken out again. Planning and Zoning looked at splitting R3 districts into 2 districts. The proposal was to consider the M would potentially do this. You know, it's not, I even asked Ms. Thornborough, I asked her, I said, can you give me a percentage of how much this has changed since the beginning? And she couldn't give it, you know, that's a trick question, right? But I wanted to see what she would say. And she said, I can't give you a percentage, but I could give you all the examples of all the changes.
Is it kind of one of those better safe than sorry?
My legal advice, I'm always conservative on these things. I always err on the benefit of giving the public an opportunity to be heard. When it's a tie, I would always be conservative and recommend a second public hearing.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for indulging us to hear from our experts on staff. I'd like to just talk with the council here, and I apologize. I've made some notes and I'm gonna have to refer to my notes, and so I'm not gonna be making fantastic eye contact. But as I see this, many hours. I can't even imagine how many hours, staff hours, have gone into this. Countless. I've been involved in non-quorum meetings myself that were hours long. Time spent reading. I know how long it's taken me to read the record, and in my experience, it takes about 4 times as long to draft than it does to read. And that's a conservative estimate. So we're looking at a lot of time here. And I would say that I've also, for the record, feel pretty responsible for requesting this significant demand on staff time. Again and again, we've heard from our constituents in this room, and at times this room has been packed. When there are proposed projects on spaces of land, and I can think of a few examples. I'm sure you guys can as well. And the resounding comments from our constituents are, we like our neighborhood how it is. We don't want people looking in our yards, down tall buildings, essentially invade our privacy and our enjoyment of our land and our property rights. And man, hearing that impacts me. I mean, it goes to my core, because I know how I feel about my house and my privacy. And so I spent some time with a member of our community who's very, very involved and very insightful and very organized and lots of other great things. And thought, you know what, maybe I need to change my view on these restrictions of height. So I made a speech a lot like this one. And I think staff was responsive, and the mayor was responsive. And I appreciate that. Now I'm at this place where I think we have some legally problematic and inconsistent recommendations from our professionals on our committees. There's really 2 issues here. First, design review and planning and zoning, had reviewed earlier drafts of this, which I think there's been material changes since these drafts. So let me state that for the record. That's James Page's opinion. that 53 pages of material is materially different. And in particular, planning and zoning opposed proposed height transition language and did not support, as in my reading. And brilliant minds can argue, but in my reading of this, they did not support an R3 zone or splitting the R3 zone and introducing a new RM designation. That's how I read it. So in light of that, and some Supreme Court precedent that I think we're all familiar with, Veterans Park Neighborhood Association Incorporated versus City of Boise. Sometimes we call that the interfaith decision. As in my reading, this is not a Wadham's opinion, but in my reading that we cannot lawfully reverse or disregard a planning and zoning recommendation unless we can identify enumerated error that they committed. And that's language right out of this decision. And failure to do so, I think, could incur under this decision damages and attorney fees. So that's thing one. And then thing two that I'm concerned about is property rights. Just as I hear the members of our community that come in and don't want their neighborhoods to change, the property rights of the applicants matter as well. If people bought property and they wish to use it in a way that it is zoned for, and in particular, I think the buffers portion of this is really, two projects. I think we've got buffers and we have a potential new zone. And I have concerns, especially on the buffers, that we are imposing a duty that restricts how someone can use their land if a landowner chooses to adopt and apply for the RM zone. So what you want to do with your own property is your business if it fits code. But if that triggers a buffer ordinance on somebody who doesn't want to change and has an established business, then that's a property right too that we're meddling with. And so I'm at this place where I'm putting up red flags because I don't know how much more staff loading we should put to this project. And I want to hear your opinions, because I have concerns, and I in many ways feel like I triggered some of this, and so that doesn't feel good. So please, can I hear some opinions?
You want to go first?
Well, Bill.
So well, thank you. It was very clear. So my personal opinion is that we should try to get our code to match our comprehensive plan as close as we can. The comprehensive plan was developed by people in the community, a committee of people to help determine a vision for the city of what we would like Garden City to look like. And so I think the closer we can get our code to the comprehensive plan, the better, versus have code deviate from the comprehensive plan. So I think our goal should always try to be that our code try to as closely align with our comprehensive plan as much as we can. Because I think a lot of effort went into the comprehensive plan. People in the public reference our comprehensive plan. It gets presented a lot. I have a copy in my bag that I like to refer to. And so I think the comprehensive plan is important about how people want Garden City to look like. And so I think our code should closely align to it. So that's, to answer the mayor's question. The one question I'm a little unclear, the question on interfaith, Mr. Lyons, is my understanding is they lost that court case because their P&Z made a recommendation based on Boise's code, which the council then ignored. So, but if we're looking at changing the code, we make adjustments to the code, then P and Z would then, and council would then follow whatever that revised code is. So I think I look at it a little bit differently, right? I think if, of course, if we deviated from them on our existing code, but if we make changes to our code through this buffer, whatever, planning and zoning would then follow whatever code we create, right? And then we would follow their recommendations. So to me, they're a little bit different. We're not opposing or telling them that we're not following current code, is that we're getting rewriting code. So I look at those a little bit differently. So in this case, we're looking at changing the code. You know, my position on height restrictions, I think there needs to be.
Bill, can you just
something
make a record of that?
What?
Can you make a record on what your?
So my
position
height,
is?
my position on the height restriction is I'm just opposed to unlimited height, right? So I have no, you know, along, it did maybe different sections of code, but unrestricted height to me is just an invitation to have things that are just out of proportion with what we want to see in the city and opposed to the comprehensive code. 10-story building might be fine, a 20-story building, double that. I would say that does not fit with what people in Garden City would like to see. So I'd like to see some type of height restriction. You know, it could be 6 stories, 10 stories, whatever we want, but just the word unrestricted, to me, I don't like that term. I kind of like the RM just because it gave, if someone wanted to use that as a zoning, they could use it, and it does provide a height restriction. So I don't see the harm in having that new zoning categorization, just because you have it in the code doesn't mean it's going to be applied. We have to vote on it, and it has to be applied. So I guess I don't see why that would hurt to add that new zoning code, you know. But so that's kind of my position, you know, my thought process on that. And then in terms of property rights, I mean, I get that people have property rights, but what we do is we tell people how to manage their properties. So I sometimes find it interesting of like, well, we can't tell people how to develop their property. Well, we tell people how to develop their property all the time. We tell them how to landscape it. We tell them what it looks like. We want to tell them how the parking's done. We tell them, you know, so city council's job is to really steer how people develop their land. Now, we don't want to do things that arbitrarily take away all their rights, but I think telling someone they can't build a skyscraper, that's within our purview, or to build something that's not aesthetically compatible with the city, that's within our purview. So, you know, I think it's just a fine balance of trying to find kind of what works for everybody. You got it, the existing people, kind of like you talked about, you wouldn't want something really tall right behind your house. You know, how do you really balance that? And I think the buffers might be a good start. At least it provides either landscaping buffering or some type of thing to protect people, or some type of height restriction of that's just not unrestricted. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Jacobs. Just kind of some yes/no follow-up. Are you in favor of bifurcating buffers from RM to zone creation? Should that be 2 separate projects?
So say that again, I'm sorry.
So buffering, there's a buffering piece, and then there's
Oh, the P. Yeah, we should separate those.
and which would you prefer to see first?
I think that would be I think we should separate them too, so it's easier on staff. And then I think whatever would be easiest for staff in terms of path of least resistance.
So I'm hearing you say we should continue to go forward in this track that staff has started.
Yeah, I think we
split.
should, and I think it probably is a material change, and I think we might want to give the public another opportunity to speak to us, and then we're not wondering of whether we had a material change or not. We just assume there is.
And then, thank you. And then I'm also hearing you say we have a bit of a chicken and egg problem. I'm worried about going against what planning and zoning recommended, but it's recommended on existing code.
Right.
And you're saying, but if the egg hatches before the chicken, we change the code and then remand back to planning and zoning to see if the recommendation changes. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know, so that they base their decisions on code, right? If there's a code change, let's say code changes from A to B and it gets approved, then they will make their recommendations based on whatever that new code is. And then if they make a recommendation on code B because we changed it, then I think legitimately we can't, per the interface sanctuary, they're the governing body, we gotta watch out for that. You know, we can't contradict unless we have a really good reason.
Error.
Error, right?
I think the word
On
is
existing
important.
code. So I guess that maybe Mr. Wadums could clarify this, but it's on existing code. So if we vote to change the code, then they would use that as their new baseline. And then we would take the recommendation based on that new code, if I'm understanding that correctly.
And can I ask a question, Mr. Wadums? Were you about to address that?
I can do that now or later.
Go ahead, and then I'll ask a question.
Yeah, am I wrong? That's just how I'm thinking.
Mayor, Council President, Council Member Jacobs, nobody's wrong. Everybody's partially right.
I love this guy.
Just a couple of things. I mean, there's some similarities with the interfaith case. There's also some things that make it different. For example, what we're talking about right now, this is a legislative thing. That was a quasi judicial case. And so they had a standard of review in their city code regarding quasi judicial review, specifically conditional use permits. And it said that a difference of opinion is not grounds for reversal. So this is a little bit different because our code does not say that, number one. Number two, this is a legislative matter and not a quasi judicial matter. But some of the same issues that the council president pointed out are valid. But this is, I'm less concerned with interfaith regarding that particular issue because this is a legislative matter. That answers the question.
That specifically answers I was going to ask you about quasi judicial versus legislative. So, thank you. Valuable. Council President, I think maybe I'll start by saying that I agree with your comments that I think this has become kind of a behemoth for us because of the sensitivity around property rights and, you know, just trying to address that fundamental right of the people that live in Garden City. And it's complex, I think. It's very complex to try and meet the needs of our residents, but also meet the needs of individual property owners. I think there's a lot of push and pull there, for lack of a better way of saying it. So none of that really matters that it's become a behemoth. I mean, it just has. I agree. I also feel bad that that our staff has worked. I don't even want to begin to think about how long they have on this, and it's our deliberations that have created it. So that's a problem or something that I think about. But again, I think if something's going to become a behemoth, it's a topic like this. So I guess now just to go to answering some questions. I also concur that I feel like it's a material change. Oh, and before I answer more questions, I have another question for Mr. Wadums. I didn't go back through your memo within the past 5 or 10 minutes or so, but I think you said, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but the word remand back to P&Z, that is an option. And I guess I was going to ask you if that's correct. Did I read that or misunderstand that? And if you did offer that as a potential option, what are the pros and cons?
Mayor, Councilmember Rasmussen, that is an option just to remand it back to planning and zoning. Some of the cons are that will slow the process
Yes.
down, sending it back down. So that's one of the cons is if we're trying to get to this sooner than later, that will cause some delay. I imagine a couple months on top of what you would otherwise. It's not a legal requirement that you remand it. You could just have another public hearing here. And then so I would say that that's a council discretion thing. If the council thinks there's a material change, that's maybe question number one. And then question number two, if the council believes there's a material change, what to do about it. And I think the council could remand it if you want planning and zoning to take another look at it. Or I think you could just have another public hearing in front of this body. And I think that's within the council's discretion.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And the reason I ask that is because I value a lot our planning and zoning commission's opinions on code. I think they're extremely well-versed in the topic but I also recognize the the delay that would cause as far as completing this project. So anyway, but yes, I do agree that there is material change. And remind me of the other questions, Council President.
Councilmember Rasmussen, thank you. Another question would be, should we split these two projects?
Yes. Yes.
And do you have a priority?
So again, I think there's a way to prevent the cart before the horse, or whatever that phrase is, about, letting planning and zoning tackle a subject first before it comes to us, and however that was to happen. I think it's taken what part of what we've been talking about now and moving that over to the PUD thing, or just help my understanding of what the options are.
Mayor, Councilmember Rasmussen, staff is only proposing a small portion to be moved into the PUD
Right.
ordinance. Staff would suggest if you're breaking them apart, to remand them, or just breaking them apart to probably not add to the PUD ordinance, to just separate how they could be. One commentary, if I can slip one in there, from staff on the zoning. We've really focused in on RM and R3. I think as you continue to look into code and the comp plan, there may be other zones that you might want to look at as thoroughly. And that's just a commentary that these two particular zones, the potential for one and another one, were the area of focus. The R3 in particular, because there's a lot of R3 in an area of the comp plan that's completely different than another area of the comp plan. And I think that's why this worked its way into the buffer ordinances, because how do you deal with those differently in the different areas of town? But there may be other zoning districts that you want to look at.
Yeah.
For example, do you want to create something for the destination nodes, or there are other things that aren't completely aligned with zoning districts aligning future land uses in the comprehensive plan.
One thing I want to make sure that we're talking about the same things. When this is a question, and then my understanding, when we're talking about splitting this thing, there's two pieces of this, what you could construe as splitting. One is take the section out that we seem to have agreed should go to planning and zoning and be dealt with the PUD, the small section. The other splitting is splitting buffering from RM.
And Mayor, members of council.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding, and we're talking about making a split, whether creating a new zoning designation and separating that from this buffering discussion. Okay. Okay, I'm not telling you what you said. I'm trying to make sure I understand what you meant. Okay, yes, Charlie.
Mayor, point of order. The other piece I just want to make sure the council is aware of is that half of this ordinance applies citywide. So we're talking about a new zoning designation. We're talking about new buffers, but there are all these other things that would be applicable citywide. For example, fences and retaining walls, landscaping standards, so on and so forth. And one of my concerns is that this was not noticed citywide. So we have all these, well, it was noticed citywide. Okay, it was noticed citywide. Okay, but in terms of separating things, they are things that are specific to a zoning designation, and then there are other regulations that are citywide. So, I mean, there are several different things in this bucket. This ordinance.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
If you're ready for comments, go ahead. I'm contemplating on that we just heard.
So, President of Council, first, I want to say I'm so grateful that you thoughtfully went through all the details and shared your concerns and my perspective, not surprisingly, is a little bit different. We did not get here strictly on your say so alone. We all were here. We all agreed that it was worth contemplating. And in my opinion, it's worthy, and it is still worthy because it was brought to us by our constituents. We are only here to serve at the pleasure of those that vote for us. And therefore, there's a lot of good ideas. It has merit, and that is how we got here. Likewise, I understand that it's required a lot of time and effort, and I applaud our staff. But again, it's at the pleasure of our constituents that wanted to see this. So it's worthy. And I'm very, very proud of the work product that's been generated in the time and your time and everybody that's applied serious consideration and effort into developing these options. That's exactly what my interpretation is what our community wants, is for us to have an option to apply some thoughtful zones that can help make their property feel more secure, more attractive, less invasive by other development. So I believe that we've been moving down a path that achieves that and is meeting expectations. If they're my boss, I would say, am I meeting your expectations? Generally, I think they'd say, yeah, you're looking at what we want you to look at. Having said all of that, I do believe there's been material change. When it was summarized this way, I'm very concerned that planning and zoning hasn't seen it in some pretty significant changes. We are the legislative body. At the end of the day, it's us, but it would be remiss of us not to allow other very critical to Councilmember Rasmussen's. That committee is very strong. I truly value their opinion. And so I think it would make a lot of sense to whatever we move forward. They need to have a shot at the comprehensive where we're at now. That needs to be reviewed at the planning and zoning level. I'm going to throw in a caveat. I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Taunton's opinion. And before we go any further, I think it would be very valuable for all of us to take a look at those comments also. So, I think another option is we put this off again until we get those public comments for review. I think I understand. I do also very much value Director Thornborough's opinion. And if she's making a recommendation that we take a section of this and we move it to the PUC, that would be, I'm going to stand behind her on that recommendation. I don't see any reason not to follow that guidance. The other comments that I've heard that you know, I've stated, I believe there's material change means, in my opinion, we need to have another public hearing. But the other comments, as the mayor just pointed out, that I'm not sure we've flushed through and certainly hearing it this evening is, should we be taking a look at these zone designations and ensuring that we're capturing, you know, rather than piecemealing stuff? Because believe it or not, for me, the visual of looking at it on the table was like, ooh, you know, looking at that table is like, well, if we change that, should we then change this? So I think we should use this opportunity to thoroughly vet that. I had one last, and my computer just shut down, so give me 1 second. But the other comment I had was, let's see. I think I was tracking with Councilmember Rasmussen in that I'm not sure, you know, the chicken or the egg can we remand back to P and Z? But my opinion is, and I don't know if this follows process, is, and so I was gonna say, Teresa, don't even say that. But in my dream world, I would like to get Mr. Taunton's comments, have the opportunity to review that, send it all back to planning and zoning, have the section of the PUC come out, have the planning and zoning commission have the ability to look at that clean version with alongside Mr. Taunton's comments before we schedule a public hearing, so that we have a nice packet that's cleaned up for the public.
Mayor, just a brief point of order regarding Bob Taunton. He's on right now. I don't, what happened was, I've worked with Mr. Taunton for years and I respect his opinion on these things. He's been doing it longer than me. So I sent him an email and said, what do you think? And he sent me back what he thought. I don't know if he intended that to be a public document or not. He may be caught a little surprised by us referencing him. But that's what happened. Is I valued his input. I asked for his input and he provided it to us. I'll probably need to talk to Mr. Taunton and make sure he's comfortable with his comments being put out in the public realm. But that's how, and generally that's kind of like my MO. When I have issues that are complicated, I reach out to my friends and my colleagues, lawyers, planners, staff. I reach out to everybody because I just think it makes a better end product. So since he's listening, I thought I would explain that for him. Thank you.
My last comment was relative to the interfaith sanctuary. I appreciate that at this point in time, and that was a pretty significant ruling. I wasn't sure how it would apply to this, and I don't think, particularly given that this is a legislative decision, that it does. But also my observation is, I want for us to act judiciously and in compliance with the law. I don't want to act out of fear. So we need to do what's in the best interest of this community, as long as we're following the law. That was my comment and observation on that. Did you have any other questions, President of the Council?
No.
Did I miss anything?
Nope. I meant to say in my comments as well, a nod to Bob Taunton. I think he's been a friend to the city for many years. And if that document was intended for public consumption, I would sure love to see it.
Yeah. I think it's also pretty clear. I mean, I think one of the strengths of the city is our P and Z commission, as Councilmember Rasmussen said, and our design consultant. So, you know, I made my comments about kind of, you know, they'll follow whatever the code is, but certainly the Councilmember Jorgens is we need their feedback and their comments and their whatever on what we're doing, because they're a valuable resource.
I believe we had taken notice as a council of, I want to stop short of saying exigent circumstances, but you know, our constituents had asked for a timely response. And now we're looking at even a bigger elephant to eat if we're going to revamp all zones and realign the comprehensive plan. But if that's the right way to do it, I think that's the work that should be done.
President of Council, that is the one, there were actually two other comments. I would like to see this more in alignment with our I would like to see our code more in alignment with comprehensive plan. It is very frustrating to sit here in this position, have our code that is disjointed from the comprehensive plan in many ways. And it's frustrating to have a comprehensive plan, which is not law, and have applications come through which meets code, but clearly doesn't support in some instances the comprehensive plan. So I would like to see those in alignment. Regarding the timeline, I apologize, but I understand that others may have a drive on a timeline. My personal opinion and objective has not been to drive to a timeline, but to produce a quality product that will be long-standing and serve the community well.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the council has come to a decision 3-1 that what is before us represents a material change.
Okay, we can deal with that. I do want to give Jen an opportunity to kind of, when we talk about, I don't think she was intimating, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, that we open the entire zoning code up and look at everything. I think it was narrower than that, so maybe you could comment on that, Jen.
Mayor, members of the council, if we are to look at all of the zones at once, I do think that will take some time, not a couple of months, but a couple of months plus. And so, not that it doesn't need to be done, we're a couple of years into just little by little taking a chunk at a time, but that is a large chunk that I would anticipate taking a lot of discussion, a lot of work sessions, and a lot of time because of that. It's not that couldn't be done. That could be the direction. But just also that the intent, the direction I believe the council has given staff to date is to take bite-sized pieces and eat the apple one bite at a time. And so we certainly could take, have a big bite at once, or we could take sections of that. Certainly, we will have to revisit the same section of code maybe a couple of times if we do it that way. But we could address all of the future land uses within the comp plan at one fell swoop, if that is the direction. And then in listening to your discussions, and knowing that you find this to be a material change, if you could be succinct as possible, not only if you think it could be remedied through a hearing or if you would like to see it remanded, but if it's remanded, what in particular there's a material change on that you would like to be addressed. Is it the RM zone and R3 and the buffer is okay, the rest of the buffer ordinance is okay? Or is it you want the whole thing just to be reviewed to be sure? Or how you would imagine that to go forward?
Mr. Mayor and Director Thornborough, I think a remand to P&Z is premature.
Okay.
I think the material change, in my mind, that finding triggers an updated public hearing that's properly noticed. And then I understand we have been noticed to the entire city, but this will affect the entire city. So the notice should be really clear about that. And I think we take marching orders from our constituents, and they will guide, I think, the process that we should do going forward. That's my opinion.
Okay. I think this through just for a second. Am I correct in that the council is fine with taking the small section that we have referenced that is already being considered as part of the PUD ordinance, completely separate ordinance? And that's in the conduit at the Planning and Zoning Commission now. So we can give that definitive direction to Jenna.
Agreed.
Okay, we're good with that.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so Jenna, that's decided. Okay. On on the let me take one minor pause here. We've been talking about Bob all evening, and he's on the line. Bob, you're free to comment or not comment at your pleasure.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't expecting to have my name come up quite as often as tonight. Certainly the comments that I made, and I appreciate that Mr. Wadhams explained the circumstances. I anticipated that they would be public, so please review them. My perspective, of course, on making the comments is not because I had a particular issue that related to the RM and the R3. I was more concerned about all of the changes that were being made to the overall code. But I did offer some thoughts based on my experience, both in land use approvals and also development, related to the other aspects of the code. So I'm certainly welcome to have a discussion with anyone about the comments that I made, and appreciate the kind of positive comments I heard tonight. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think they're just, the comments were made because of our personal experience with you, Bob. So you're a valued resource and have been to the city. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you for clarifying that on the fact that it's all right if this is a public document, that's not a concern of yours. So that'll help Mr. Wadhams out. So, okay. Thank you, Bob. Anything else? Okay. So that opens up one of the options that I heard, which was to pause this discussion until we have an opportunity to absorb what Mr. Taunton has submitted. And we can do that. In the interest of time, if you decided to do that, do it that way. Our next meeting, the person who recommended that isn't going to be here. So we'll just leave that, set that aside for a minute. The specificity that Jenna is talking about, let me ask you this. Do you want a change to the citywide or a consideration of a citywide buffering change? because I've heard comments that it would apply citywide. I've talked to Jen about that, and Jenna, I'm going to ask you to help me remember what some of the specifics, but I got the impression that because of the current zoning east of Glenwood, there really aren't things that are going to apply to any degree if it was citywide. In other words, the buffering is for a certain type of a zone next to another type of a zone, and that occurrence isn't prevalent east of the fairgrounds. Is that, am I remembering that right or not?
Mayor and members of the council, I would argue that most of the code that's drafted is citywide, and that, for example, the landscape buffers already exist in code citywide. It's just been augmented to be clear. The design standards for non-residential or residential are already citywide. They're just augmented to address saying, be cognizant of visual privacy adjacent to neighbors. I think where we end up calling this the buffer ordinance is the area of code that talked specifically about height restrictions adjacent to the R2 and the RM. There is a proposal that's highlighted to now have that be citywide instead of addressing adjacent to a specific zone, so that a neighbor can't inadvertently or advertently rezone their neighbor's property without their permission. And that's been replaced with some potential language that would be citywide between any zones that are not compatible with one another. So the wording is, in instances of different adjoining zone districts, the allowed heights may not be compatible with adjacent properties. And then it gives illustrative ways to achieve compatibility. And that can be that a public street separates them, a structure separates them, et cetera. And so that would also be citywide. However, the incompatibility with an R2 to an R3 zone that we've discussed through this process would not exist on the east end of town, just because there isn't any R2 zone. It's only R3 when you find a current residential district. So yes, to Charlie's statement earlier, yes, you're correct. And the ordinance now is drafted actually to be more citywide because it's based on design standards versus specific zones. But a lot of what we've heard that people care about isn't on the east side of town.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
And Director Thornborough, is incompatibility a finding of fact?
Mayor, Council President Page, it depends on the application. Many of the applications, so like a plan unit development, a conditional use subdivision, et cetera, most all of them currently do have compatibility with the neighborhood as one of the findings, the current findings.
I think that's what I struggle with the most. I'm sorry,
No,
Mr. Mayor,
no.
Director Thornborough. That's one of the things I struggle with the most, because when we have constituents in here that are angry and lighting fires on our lawns, figuratively, at least to this point, you know, it's this statement, and they point to the comprehensive plan and say, you know, this isn't compatible. How is this compatible?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so if a factual finding is really, I think, a key component, and I think those words need to be said, you know, that we find this incompatible or we find this compatible, and it's not sort of open to everyone's interpretation, right? It should be a finding.
Yeah, because of.
Yeah, and these are the reason statements that make it compatible or not compatible. Because I think that's what I always struggle with in a room full of people that aren't always happy.
Yeah, that's in the eye of the beholder. There's no doubt about that to a large degree. I don't like the word compatible at all, but I don't have a better one. Okay, so the point of bringing all that up was portions of what we're considering are going to impact the west of Glenwood differently than east of Glenwood because of what we just heard, that we don't have any R2 on the east end of town. So when we started this, and we're trying to diminish the impact of an R3 development on the west side of town, that adjoins a R2 or a R3 that's been developed as R2, meaning low density, trying to diminish that relative impact. So it's kind of morphed. So if so I'm concerned that we still maybe aren't collectively understanding the magnitude or less than magnitude change that the citywide pieces are going to entail. So we've got, and you get to interrupt anytime, Jenna. You don't have to go, Mr. Mayor. Just chime in. We've got portions that are already in our code that's been explained, that are either enhanced at some degree or clarified, that are going to be citywide, that most of which at some level are citywide now. Is that right? The landscaping, the fence,
That's correct.
where it would apply on the west side, that not the east side, is higher density, taller development next to a R2 neighborhood. So you have to do what they did at Strawberry Apartments over here. You got to put a one-story garage, and then you move the taller stuff back further away from the residents, that kind of stuff. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
one quick question, if we proceed with looking at different zonings like RM and R3, would you consider RM and R3 to be compatible? Or would this buffer then, let's say, I can just try to think of, let's say ACHD moves off that 16-acre property right down there, and we want to develop that to be more like the current water district versus, and so we rezone that to RM. Within the adjacent R3, would you consider those two definitions to be incompatible or compatible? So this new zone would kick in and it would be on the east, it would be east of Glenwood, and that's the only scenario I can think of, is that particular piece of land, because eventually it's going to get redeveloped. And does it end up being a point, whatever, or does it get rezoned to potentially RM? That's where I think we might have a conflict down the road, east of Glenwood. So that was my question. How do you see those two zones?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, it really would depend on the height that's proposed. And so right now it doesn't say between which two zoning districts. It would just say it depends. And so potentially, but if you had a very tall building that is proposed, then there would be code saying an illustrative way to address this is to put a garage in between, to step it back or have step backs, but it doesn't give an exact if you're 15 feet taller, et cetera, because I think that might go back to concern saying you're inadvertently rezoning your neighbor's property if we put some of the specifics in.
It's the RM and it's 35, 45 feet in that area, and then R3 is unrestricted height.
Mhm.
You know, you could, it of course depends on the application, right? So that the code could kick in east of Glenwood in that particular scenario. I don't know whether it'll happen or not. That's the only.
Well, the control factor is having an RM zoning designation on the books. The council has no obligation to rezone anything.
No, true. No, it's only if.
So-
we approve that.
Yeah, so that condition, rezones can be conditioned. Projects that come in and want to rezone can be subject to a development agreement. You can control it to whatever degree the council would want to control it. So that part of it doesn't really concern me. If you're going to use the ACHD property, it could be a pretty intense piece application there. And I can't, so just putting my development hat on a minute, I wouldn't have any interest in an RM zone on that piece of property. I'd want to leave that thing wide open. So under the current code.
So I didn't know if the applicant may, let's say they asked for it to be.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and all those things are possible, but I think the point I'm trying to make is if we're gonna take a look at the comments we had from Bob. Bob, sorry we keep talking about you, but that's just what happens when we've had experience with you. But at any rate, if you want to take a look at that and marry this to what we've already got, I just encourage you to look at what we have and don't get hung up. Well, let me back up. Understand what citywide means. Are we making some dramatic change that's going to impact a significant portion of our city east of Glenwood with what would apply citywide? Because in some form, most of it already applies citywide. So it's just taking little parts that are separated and applying them universally over the city. So, so I don't want that to build up to be such a monumental thing in our minds because it's something citywide that it's throwing us into the trench. I think my opinion is the overwhelming majority of this buffering ordinance meets what our citizens have asked us to do and doesn't have any measurable negative context on anything east of Glenwood. But it clarifies some things and could help private residents there as well, potentially on some of the privacy issues. Because we do have large developments going up next to single family homes down there, even though the zone isn't R2. So I don't think we have as big a problem as I think we're building up in our mind. So if the material change, if the RM is making our heads spin, you can isolate the RM and come in and create an RM ordinance anytime and leave the buffering to the buffering. And then we aren't going to confuse anybody. So when I said a few minutes ago, what are we talking about segregating? If you're going to segregate something, take the RM out and let's forget the RM for the moment. The buffering needs to go first. The chicken, that's the chicken. We can have lots of eggs that are different zones, but the buffering's the chicken. So I think I don't get my way. If I could get my way, it would be, let's get Bob's memo distributed. Let's give ourselves a homework assignment to read the current iterations and have Jenna send them out again, just so we don't confuse them. Get rid of the red lines, get a clean copy of the current iteration, and look at that in comparison with, and bounce that back and forth yourselves through Bob's comments, if there seems to be a desire to do that.
And remove the RM from that.
Just take the RM out of your thinking for now. Let's look at the zone thing at another time or separately. Because all of us, when we talk about RM, we've already in our mind zoned a bunch of property. So that's confusing. And just narrow this back down to how it started. I think Teresa, laid out that history very well a few minutes ago. So I think we're overthinking that a little bit.
Do you then, Mr. Mayor, think there's been a material change?
Well, if you take the RM out, then that could be another discussion. I personally don't see a reason to send it back to planning and zoning. As much as I respect them, they've dealt with this to a degree where, particularly if you pull the RM out and you take the piece out that's going to go back on the PUD, then what you've got left is minor, frankly, tweaks and clarifications to stuff that's mostly, for the most part, already in our code. Now, if you want to determine that because that would make changes citywide, even though they're not major changes, but I think they were in the basis of the code that the plan zoning already looked at. So never hurts to have another hearing. I mean, I don't have any problem with that, but I don't think, particularly if you pull the RM out, there's any reason to send it back to planning zoning.
Mr.
But
Mayor.
that's an opinion that doesn't carry any weight here. So go ahead.
Your opinion's the most valid. Thank you. On page 132 of the packet, if everybody could look at that. It's been brought to my attention. Article M, top 1/3. This is subtitle Boise River Natural Resource. This is a 6-page section. Would this be part of the buffering? If we were to look just at buffering,
That's a discretion of the council.
because this seems like a new section.
President of the council, what was that page again?
132
Oh,
in the
yeah.
packet. Article in Boise River Natural Resource. Jenna, give us the background on that.
Certainly, Mayor,
Section.
members of the council. Years ago, this was worked on by a committee, and then COVID occurred and it dropped off. The intent was to do two things with the original. There had been a code that was adopted that intended to do two things. One was highest and best use of the property adjacent to the river. And then the other was how to address at some level the buffering to the river itself. And so that's how it worked itself back into the buffering, not the highest and best use, but the buffering side of things. And that it was code ready. It talks about how to address the river and the setbacks and the vegetation. It did go through P and Z. It's not a new thing that got slid in at the last moment here at City Council.
Was this Was this the Boise River overlay?
Mayor, Council President Page, yes, this was the work, the third iteration of the Boise River overlay that was worked on with a committee of individuals.
Yes, I do remember that. Thank you. Is this, in your opinion, a standalone effort?
Mayor, Council Member Page, it certainly can be. I can also see where it's part of a buffer ordinance in that not just property owners buffers, but the river, how you buffer and how you interact adjacent to the river. If you're developing adjacent to the river, do you have certain standards to abide by? How do you interact with the setbacks, et cetera? So very much buffering, but it is very specific to the river. So it could be looked at either way. We can take it apart, chew on it separately, just turn it into another ordinance or keep it with the buffers, either way.
I appreciate the intent. I don't believe anyone thinks the highest and best use of our river adjacent properties are horse stables or lay down yards or salt sheds. I just want to make a record of that, but
My apologies, Mayor, Council President Page. I don't mean to interrupt you, and I just did. This does not address the land uses adjacent to the river. It just addresses the interaction, the setbacks, et cetera.
thank you.
So, so what do you think about the suggestion to get a clean copy, no strike-throughs, new language that you've talked about tonight? You quoted part of it, Jenna. And take a look at that. We'll get Mr. Taunton's comments that were solicited by our city attorney and get those to you to look at that. And look at it in the context of the presumption that we're going to take the RM out and segregate that. And look at section 18, which we just talked about on page 132, in the light of protecting the river amenity, irregardless of what the adjacent land use is. And if that's okay, then that's okay. If that's not okay, that can become another piece that you look at separately. And if we do all that, we're looking at May 12th to tackle this topic again. Is that okay?
It's okay with me.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Mhm.
Okay. That's what we'll do. Let's take a break for a few minutes before we get into our next item. So you all get should get some kind of a endurance award for this, but it's these are you can think of simple things that you'd like to see done, but they have tentacles that go all over the place. So the process is messy, but it's the only process we have, and it's working. I really appreciate the council kicking all this stuff around and gladly doing that in the presence of anybody that wants to listen. So with that, we'll take a recess for 7 or 8 minutes, and then we'll come back and get on with our agenda. Thank you. We're back on the record at 8:37. Okay, next item on our agenda is item G3. This is a first reading of ordinance 1055-25. And this amends Title 6. That's water and sewer.
Mr. Mayor, I have a memo on that.
And there's a memo on that, and it's on page 204, is where that starts. In your packet, and council, is the information in the packet sufficient? Do we need to have a discussion? If so, I'm happy to do that.
I think the information is sufficient.
Agreed.
Okay,
I'm ready to make a motion.
okay, the matter before the council then is the first reading of ordinance 1055-25.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move for reading by title only of ordinance, proposed ordinance, get the number here, 1055-25.
Second.
had a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call, oh, go ahead. Clerk call a roll. I gotta get the motion approved first.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
First reading ordinance 1055-25. An ordinance of the city of Garden City, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, amending Garden City Code Title 6 Water and Sewer, Chapter 2 Municipal Water System, Chapter 3 Municipal Sewer Collection System, Chapter 5 Cross Connections, Chapter 6 Industrial Pretreatment, repealing Section 8 Special Agreements by simplifying language, removing redundant or unnecessary language, and amending language to change some violations to infraction offenses, providing severability, repealing conflicting city code provisions, appealing a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Item G4, this is a resolution. This is resolution 1204-25. This is our Hearts Across the Valley effort with CBH Homes. And they have a standard agreement that I'm asking the council to approve, so we can get that underway. Is everybody familiar with that? Okay. I will tell you that Jody, is it Eichelberg, I'm sorry. Jody Eichelberg and Danielle Hurd are heading up that effort. They're going to be working directly with CBH Homes, keeping Susanna in the loop, and Danielle's really taking a lead on that. So the only guidelines I gave them on the selection was not political, not controversial. So they'll work on a theme for two of these hearts along the green belt. All these things. So one at the boardwalk, and I think one maybe out west toward the West Bridge, or maybe in this area along here where we have a lot of traffic.
Cool.
Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
in the presentation that they said that there would be no cost to the city.
there isn't.
Why does the agreement?
They're
say
picking up, they're paying the artists. Yeah,
$1,000?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
oh, any other questions?
No, thank you.
So I reviewed this agreement and I can't help but continue to ask myself why. I understand that we're a city that appreciates art. And I understand that this is art that comes to us relatively free of costs and burden. I can't help but feel like it's a bit of a commercial.
It is. They'll have a small logo on it. There's just so you know, there'll be one at Talaya, one, the Ada County's doing one on their property. You know, Caldwell, I mean, it's all through the valley, and they're temporary. They're here for 2 years. And then you
I'm
know,
not against it. I
Yeah.
just, there's some things to note. I
Yeah.
don't believe CBH builds in the category inventory that we have in Garden City. And it's just curious.
yeah,
to me.
yeah. Well, you know, it's what they've represented all along. When I first heard about this at the Treasure Valley Partnership meeting last fall, was one of their management level folks was in Kansas City on an unrelated trip. And it was Hearts Across America at the time. And they thought, this is really cool. So they went to the boss and said, can we do this in the valley? You know, and just kind of a corporate effort to enhance the aesthetic value of the valley. So I think it's, I don't think there's any motives that make me at all nervous. They're sponsoring it. And those that want to accept that offer are.
Mr. Mayor, may I give the legal answer? Real quick. I promise quick.
Well, what do we want a legal answer?
For the record, the city can enter into these kind of contracts if it serves a public purpose. All these things are about public purpose doctrine. Here, any benefits to the private must be incidental. I think that's fine. And the public purpose, I think in this context, would be enhancing community engagement and cultural enrichment. So I think there's a public purpose, but that is the standard, whether it serves a public purpose. And I would say here it does.
Mr. Mayor, President of the Council. So I forget her name, but the leadership at
Mariel or something, I think.
but the leadership at CBH is very dynamic and they contribute. So I have personal experience that, you know, leadership, or whatever, women in business, whatever, like they weren't even nominated, nobody from their company, but they sent things to every nomination, every person that was nominated. So they do a lot of public outreach and things to improve community. And I would fully expect, having seen these like in Austin and in Rochester and different cities across the nation. And I'm hoping that we do something similar or that they do something similar where they at some point have a, you know, treasure hunt, go find these different placed parts across the valley. And what a fantastic thing for us if it drives people into our community to search out the bench or the plaque or whatever. You know, even if they don't, I would see us wanting to, as a city, you know, I have connections at the chamber. You know, we could easily, I can easily see this turning into a fun thing for the city and something to draw people in. So that's my observation based on seeing something similar in other cities.
So.
And I think it's tax break for them.
Sure. Sure, it is. So, but I had the same initial thought.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I move to approve resolution 1204-25, resolution providing a collaborative marketing and sponsorship agreement between the city and CBH.
I'd second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yeah.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item, and our last item before adjournment is under H1, that's unfinished business. That is, I'm going to give you just a little briefing on the meeting that Jen and I had with the Corps. We have spent $670,000, at least that's what we advanced to them. They haven't quite spent all of that yet,
Very close.
very close. Our obligation is, total obligation if we complete the project is 1.1 million. The what I asked them was that what I told them was the most important component of what's happened to date, and something that frankly, in my opinion, is worth a lot of effort, which equates to money, is the flood inundation model that they had to develop to do this whole analysis. It's significantly more accurate than anything we've ever had done along the river here. Dramatically more accurate than our FEMA maps that show, in quotes, our flood inundation. So my question was, I want the city to have access to that model. What's that going to take? As far as we've gone, if we don't have access to the model, whatever money we've spent is probably of very limited value to us. So we had some discussion about that. I told them why that was so important, because we could evaluate projects that we may not need federal help for. Our Nick Kloss, our hydrological engineer, can run those models, and they can look for low-hanging fruit and then those kinds of things. Outside of the obligation to try and come up with a match to do the whole project. So we did, Lisa did the math on the low end of what it would take for us to come up with a match on a $43 million project, which is the least, but not their preferred option for us. And that would require us to go out to a bond and expect people, 2/3 of our voters, to approve a bond for 20 years that would raise their property tax over 22%. So, and this was a Zoom call, so I could see them, and there was no skepticism in the statement that that's the likelihood of that happen approaches zero. So if the city is going to implement any part of the plan, it's going to have to be incrementally. And we have constraints because of the way the program's set up to do that incrementally. Although they've committed to try and work some things, whatever some things is. So I went back to, I want to know, and then they said, well, we're about out of money. We need some more money. And I said, well, I want to know what it's going to take to get that model released to us, the flood inundation model.
Takes it $650.
Well, no, it's going to take more than that. So what they told me, which I'm sure is correct, is step one is we got to get to a preferred solution, a preferred plan. And my recommendation is they're going to come up with what they believe is a preferred plan, and we can ask for them to consider a modified plan. My recommendation is we let them come up with their preferred plan, whatever it is. It's going to be 73 million. That's pretty much what I'm going to tell you. Whether it's 43 or 73, we've got the same issue. So, and then once they have that, they will send the model to through a different protocol to have that model evaluated and certified. Once it's certified, it can be released to us. So, we got an email asking, yesterday, Jenna did, I think, asking for another $100,000, which we have in the budget and we have the money and all of that. I've asked Jenna to get back in touch with them and ask if that will get us through certification of the model. And if the answer is, we don't know, or I don't know, tell them we need to know. And I want to know. And then we can discuss whether to finish the program. There frankly are advantages to having the program, even if you never use it, and set it on the shelf, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. If they finish the plan, they do all the environmental stuff to implement the plan. That's $1 bazillion if you have to have it done later. So, on the other hand, maybe there's something we could do with $300,000 to do something that would get this ball rolling. I don't know. But the important thing is we get our hands on the model.
Is there any resistance do you get any sense that they're resisting providing the model, even though we're paying for half of it?
Well, the resistance is their process. So they don't want to release anything that hasn't gone through a certification process. I guess before the meeting thought if the Corps can't say this is right, somebody else has to look at it and say it's right too. So I think that's it, Bill. I just think it's got to be certified. Just like physically we have levees along the river, but they don't count them as levees because why?
Not certified.
If they're not certified. So certification is a big deal. So whatever that is, we got to get it done. So that's, and I was very clear about that in the meeting, and the communication we got didn't really address that. So I'm following up on that.
Well,
We
if
need
you
something
think,
in writing.
and if you think about it, once we have a certified model in our hands, why would we continue to pay? It's the only thing that guarantees them additional money.
Well, we can pull out anytime. We don't have any obligations. So if the question is, are they going to hold us hostage for the entire payment before we get the model? That's not the indication I had when I talked to him on the phone, but I'm going to get that clarified. So, if that's a condition, if that comes up, then my next action will be to talk to Senator Crapo and Senator Rich. So this is not appropriate. So, but I didn't get the impression of that. And you have to understand that the Corps is captive to the program guidelines that they have to work under. So they told me, and until I have reason to think they weren't being forthright, I'm going to believe they're forthright. So we'll get to that though, before we, at some point here, and I'll just keep you up to speed on what they said. So there's that. So let's talk just for a minute. I did indicate to them some of the value that the model would produce, even if we couldn't continue the plan. One of them, for example, the model shows, gives us the ability to do a cost benefit on the improvements. At the 100-year flood, according to the model, large cities, portions of the city are impacted, but a lot of it, the water is 2 or 3 inches deep, or a half a foot deep. We're not talking about underwater. We're not talking about, getting your feet wet on the second story of your home stuff. So there's that piece. There's the accuracy of the model compared to the current FEMA model that is in the 2017 maps, reduces the floodplain dramatically, according to the model. So if you have a certified model, you have the option, you want to benefit a bunch of folks, to do what's called a letter of map revision, acronym LOMAR. And that changes the FEMA flood insurance map. So properties that are now for insurance purposes in the floodplain would come out, significant amount of property. So just doing that, and it probably cost $100,000 to do that, because you got to map, do a bunch of engineering work, but so you could benefit a lot of folks just doing that. Everything west of us, just about, for example. You could look at any work you do in the river has to have you have to do a no net rise analysis. So that if you're constraining where the water can go in one area, is that going to create the water upstream from rising? You know, it can't rise more than 1 foot. So we've got a section in the urban renewal area. And we've got an urban renewal agency that's got some money. We could have that conversation on whether that is. We've got an area north of the river, west of Glenwood, that relative to this project has pretty minor improvements that could take out everything north of the river, west of Glenwood from out of the flood. So the model's a tool that is incredibly important. So goal number 1 is to get the model released.
And so we don't have a time frame. We don't, it's
No,
we need that.
No. It's something I want cleaned up before the end of the year for obvious reasons. And I think we'll get there. And even after we get the model, let's assume we get it before the plan is completely done, we'll have a discussion on, do we want to continue and get it done? If it's done and on the shelf, it's a risk that it would ever be utilized. But we're seeing major changes federally now. I told them, I said, we don't know. There'll be the FEMA function, a lot of it in some form, but FEMA itself may not be around. I don't know.
Or the people you're talking to on your Zoom call.
Or the Army Corps.
There are things that are going to change. Who's to say in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years that the president's prediction that everything's going to be beautiful and we got a lot of money, that the feds come in here and say, listen, this is really bugging us. We're going to come in and do it. They've done that from the rivers. I mean, that's happened in history. So I don't know. If you don't have a plan, that is never going to happen. Or that, I don't know, circumstances I can't even imagine. But, never thought I'd see a lot of things that are occurring right now, frankly, So, but that's an analysis later. I just wanted to let you know, as a result of this call, I made it very clear of what the city's priority was, which is the model. Because without the model, we've got 670 grand down a rat hole. In my view. That's not a good way to express it, but I mean, we won't get any benefit out of it at all without the model. So that's where we're at. And that was a good meeting. I do think they understand the circumstance. They get to hear the same thing every time we talk, because I never do not say it, which is there's no proportionality, meaning the scope of the work that needs to be done relative to the financial capability of the entity that's benefiting. There's no proportionality component in there. This project, if it was 5 miles along the Boise River in Boise, is a different scenario. You know, them raising $15-18 million in a bond or a big LID or whatever is on a completely different scale than town of 13,000
people to fund 43 million.
Yeah, well, we'd have to fund, well, first of all, the estimates are require eminent domain. I talked to him about eminent domain. I said, you know, eminent domain, unless you offer somebody a price and they accept it, most people on the river are gonna go, I want more, and then you do a quick take, and a year, 2, 3 later, you figure out what you've got to pay it. That's just an open-ended liability. A town this size could never, the risk would be foolish. So anyway, they hear all that every time, and they're looking at ways, if there's a way to somehow phase this, or if we did a piece, for example, in the urban renewal area, whether that could count as part of the match. That was $3 or $4 million that could make that. So they're looking at those pieces. We've got some more homework, but for right now, they've asked for another 100,000. I've asked Jenna to ask them if that will get us to the certification of the model.
Is it worth asking if we sign a release of liability, if we could get an uncertified?
I don't think it would matter. I can ask, but I don't think that would matter, because they're not going to release something with their name on it.
That's not
Take their name off, I don't care,
Well, I know, but
just give us the tool. Then the other question I have.
I don't think that. I'm sure that's too rigid. I mean,
I'm sure, but I don't mind asking anybody a question these days. It's like, well, I don't know.
yeah.
But the other question is, as I recall from the presentation we had, there's currently no timeline or expiration in which, if we don't have a plan, all of a sudden we're designated uninsurable.
No, because of some delays we've had, you know, this originally was slated to be done in 26. Well, that's been bumped to 28. So there's some built-in time. Continuing to fund the study buys you that time too, in addition to any other benefit that might accrue down the road that we don't know of. So we'll just see. I don't want to get too far out over my skis, because part of what I'm telling you is just speculation. But I can tell you, our current goal now is to get a certified model as a deliverable in our hands.
And you have utter confidence that that model, that once it's certified, forces FEMA's hand to remap? Because that, to me, that's the only value. Period,
Well,
as a taxpayer.
what it does is
I don't want to have to pay flood insurance.
it creates the argument. It's the engineering work that they would have to analyze to accept a map amendment. And the likelihood that they're going to accept a certified map as a result of a study by the Corps of Engineers is pretty remote that they would reject that. So. But the agencies are silent. You want to do a map amendment, you have to prove to them that the area you want to amend is no longer in the floodway. So that's typically done in small areas, and it's done on the basis of an engineer's certification. So you're getting the best minds of the federal or the Corps of Engineers, which I don't think is going to go away. It may get dosed, but Nick, our consultant, is comfortable with that. But I tell you what, in the environment we're in, representing to you that anything's an absolute. It's not something I'm going to do. I just don't want to pull the plug right now.
Thank you for staying on top of it.
Yeah, I think let's get the model.
Thanks for the update.
That I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I.
Aye.
Thank you. Adjourn.